Welcome to this brief overview of Lecküchner's master strikes for langes Messer. This video won't go into great technical detail or try to summarize all of the plays for each master strike. Instead, I will try to describe what roles the strikes play within the system. The description will also be from a longsworder's perspective, so if you have background in KDF longsword, that will help. Lecküchner has used the structure and contents of the Lichtenauer longsword sources as a template. If you want to know more about the longsword and Langmesser connection, I talk a bit more about that in the channel intro, link in the description. Lecküchner gives us versions of the 5 familiar longsword master strikes, but for Langmesser and with new names. Just like for longsword, we get 4 versetzen, where 4 of the strikes are used to counter the 4 guards. Lecküchner also adds a 6th strike, Wincker, which does not correspond to a longsword strike. Just like in the Lichtenauer longsword sources, footwork is only occasionally described. While the master strikes get rather a lot of content, they still make up a smaller proportion of the system, as Lecküchner gives us so much additional material. It is also interesting to note that after having introduced the master strikes, the guards, and using the master strikes to counter the guards, Lecküchner immediately goes on to state that it's better to counter the guards, at least Stier and Eber, with thrusts instead. Zornhau. While the other master strikes change name in the move from longsword, Zornhau is still Zornhau and Messer. As cuts go, this is a pretty basic descending diagonal long edge cut. Most of the sophistication comes into play in the follow-ups after the Zornhau itself. At its core, it is meeting an incoming cut with a cut of your own and then work from there with winding, thrusts, abnehmen, notieren, duplieren, etc. Much of the follow-up toolbox referenced later in the manual is introduced in the Zornhau section. In the follow-ups, the orientation of the edges is given rather a lot of attention, which often seems to boil down to keeping the nagel positioned to protect your hand. Zornhau gets a lot of material in the manual, but footwork isn't clearly described. Wecker. Wecker is the Langmesser cut that corresponds to Krumpau and longsword, and counters the guard Stier. The cut is not aligned with your lower arm and instead goes forward and down at an angle to your lower arm. To get this orientation of the cut, I find that using a thumb grip helps, although this is not something that is explicitly stated in the text. Wecker is most easily launched from or passing through Schrankhut. Wecker can be cut from both sides. From your dominant side, use the long edge, and from your non-dominant side, use the short edge. Footwork is described as out to the side and forward. There's a lot of material for Wecker. In many of the plays, Wecker is used to create a dominant bind and then thrust from there. Entrüsthau. Entrüsthau corresponds to Zwinger in longsword and counters the guard Logensland. A thumb grip is used to allow the messer to rotate at an angle to your lower arm. During the cut, the hilt is held high and in front of your head. This shortens your reach, but keeps your head protected from descending cuts while you attack. Entrüsthau can be used from both sides. From your dominant side you will hit with the short edge, and from your non-dominant side you will hit with the long edge. Entrüsthau can target both high and low openings. When targeting a high opening, this becomes a horizontal cut. When targeting low openings, your reach is further reduced, and it's important to remember to still keep the hilt high, or you will lose the protection an Entrüsthau should give you. Being able to target all 4 openings makes Entrüsthau very versatile and also well suited for feints. Footwork is described as out to the side and forward. Entrüsthau gets a lot of content in the manual, both in its own section, and it's also often the first move in other places elsewhere in the manual. Zwinger. Zwinger corresponds to Geferhau in longsword and counters the guard Eber. Use a thumb grip for this cut. It is a vertical short edge cut and makes it easier to push the opponent's blade to the side at the price of some range. Footwork isn't described, but the illustration shows a turn of the body being used. Zwinger gets just 1 single page in the manual. It is unclear why it gets so little attention. Is it only there to fill that slot in the Lichtenauer template? Geferhau. Geferhau corresponds to Scheitelhau in longsword. It is a long edge vertical cut that keeps the hand high and angles the point down. With a longsword, this combination of properties can be accomplished by moving the hands in relation to each other. With langmesser and only one hand on the handle, it is very difficult to angle the point down without overextending the wrist. It is interesting to note that the Dürer Fechtbuch shows Geferhau against Bastei as a short edge cut. With a short edge cut, the point can be angled down without overextending the wrist. Geferhau gets just 2 pages in the manual, one with countering Bastei, mirroring Scheitelhau against Alber in longsword. The second page contains a rather odd variant of Durchwechsel. Given that Geferhau gets so little material, is it perhaps only there to fill that slot in the Lichtenauer template? Wincker. We have now entered the bonus round. Wincker is Lecküchner's extra master strike that does not correspond to one of the longsword master strikes. The cut pretends to be a regular descending long edge cut, but when the opponent moves to parry, the short edge is turned forward. Wincker switches to the short edge to turn the messer away from the opponent's messer, instead of toward in order to push, as with Zwinger. This is used either to cut around a parry or to avoid blade contact in order to attack on the other side instead. Lecküchner recommends Wincker against opponents that rely too much on parries. It's possible that there was some name confusion in the years that passed from Lecküchner's Messer to Meyer's to Zach. Meyer's Wecker is nothing like Lecküchner's Wecker. However, it is more or less a Wincker that thrusts around the parry instead of cutting with the short edge. I find that when Wincker does not quite reach with the short edge, it is easy to turn the cut into a thrust.